The jury foreman opens his mouth to read the verdict that will send her to prison. Then the courtroom doors explode open. A paralyzed 10-year-old girl stands there, walking for the first time in 3 years, tears streaming down her face. She has one thing to say that will change everything. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. A maid accused by a CEO went to court alone until his paralyzed daughter walked in and revealed this. Before we start, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from, and don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. The courtroom felt like it was closing in on her. Simone Cartwright sat alone at the defendant's table, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone pale. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a persistent hum that seemed to match the anxiety thrumming through her veins. She could smell the old wood of the benches, the faint trace of someone's expensive perfume, and underneath it all, the sterile scent of institutional cleaning products that reminded her ironically of the very job that had brought her here. She wore the only professional outfit she owned, a navy blue dress she'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago, slightly faded at the shoulders but clean and pressed within an inch of its life. She'd ironed it 4 times last night, unable to sleep, needing something to do with her shaking hands. Around her, expensive suits rustled like wings. Leather briefcases clicked open with sounds that seemed impossibly loud in her ears. Whispered conversations buzzed like insects she couldn't swat away. Everyone else in this room belonged here. She was the outsider, the defendant, the accused. The woman who supposedly stole from a man who had already lost everything that mattered. Across the aisle, Adrian Blackwood sat with his legal team. 3 lawyers in suits that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. She could see the Rolex on his wrist catching the light, the crisp white of his shirt collar, the sharp lines of his charcoal suit that fit him like it had been painted on. Which it probably had been. Custom-tailored at some exclusive shop where people like her weren't even allowed through the door. He didn't look at her. Not once. His jaw was set in that hard line she'd come to recognize over the 8 months she'd worked in his home, the expression that meant his mind was made up, and nothing would change it. It was the same expression he'd worn that terrible evening when he'd called her into his office and accused her of theft, when he'd dismissed her protest with a wave of his hand and called the police while she stood there trembling. The morning sun cut through the tall courtroom windows, casting harsh shadows across his face, making him look even more severe than usual. His dark hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. His blue eyes, which she'd once thought were kind when he smiled at his daughter, now looked like chips of ice. Cold, unforgiving, certain of her guilt. Simone's court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking man named Gerald Wu who smelled like coffee and defeat and wore a suit shiny at the elbows, leaned over and whispered for the 3rd time that morning. "Are you absolutely sure you don't want to take the plea deal? 6 months in county jail, 2 years probation, and this all goes away. You could be out in 3 months with good behavior." She shook her head, feeling the tears burning behind her eyes but refusing to let them fall. "I didn't steal anything, Gerald. I can't admit to something I didn't do. My mother didn't raise me to lie, especially not about something like this." He sighed like he'd heard that line 1,000 times before and probably had. His shoulders slumped in a way that told her he didn't believe they could win this. The evidence was circumstantial, yes, but it was damning. And juries, he told her yesterday while going over her testimony, they don't like to believe that rich men would falsely accuse their maids. They like stories that make sense. Rich man, stolen jewelry, poor maid with money problems. That made sense to them. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmuring like a knife. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison." Everyone stood. Simone felt her legs trembling beneath her dress, her thrift store shoes pinching her feet. This was really happening. After 3 days of testimony, after all the witnesses and evidence and legal arguments, they were nearing the end. Today would bring closing arguments. Today the jury would begin deliberations. Today her fate would be decided by 12 strangers who didn't know her, didn't know her heart, didn't know that she would rather starve than steal. Judge Morrison entered through the door behind the bench, her black robes flowing, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her severe expression. She was a woman who'd spent 30 years on the bench, who'd seen every kind of case, every kind of criminal, every kind of lie. Her eyes swept the courtroom with the weight of all that experience. "Be seated," she commanded, and everyone obeyed. Simone sank back into her chair, feeling the hard wood against her spine. She glanced at the jury box, at the 12 faces that held her future. An older black woman in the front row, who reminded her painfully of her own mother. A young white man in his 20s, who kept checking his phone until the bailiff had confiscated it. A Hispanic woman in her 40s who'd cried during Simone's testimony. A middle-aged white man who'd frowned through most of the trial. Would any of them believe her? Could any of them see past the obvious narrative to the truth underneath? We're here for the matter of the state versus Simone Cartwright. Case number 472983, Judge Morrison announced. Before we proceed to closing arguments, I understand the prosecution has one final witness. Mr. Cole, Adrian's lead attorney, a shark in a gray suit named Preston Cole with silver hair and cold eyes and a reputation for never losing, stood with the kind of confidence that came from winning 200 cases in a row. Your Honor, we'd like to call a rebuttal witness, Dr. Helena Ramos, forensic psychologist. Gerald shot up. Objection, Your Honor. This witness wasn't on the witness list. We've had no opportunity to prepare. Judge Morrison frowned. Mr. Cole, you know the rules about witness disclosure. Cole's smile was smooth as silk. Your Honor, Dr. Ramos's testimony is in direct response to the defense's character witnesses. We only determined her necessity after hearing their testimony yesterday. This is proper rebuttal. The judge considered, then nodded. I'll allow it. But keep it brief, Mr. Cole. The jury's getting restless. Simone felt Gerald tense beside her as a woman in a burgundy suit walked to the stand. She had dark hair streaked with gray, glasses on a chain around her neck, and the air of someone who was used to being listened to. After swearing in, she settled into the witness chair with the ease of someone who'd done this dozens of times. Cole approached. Dr. Ramos, can you explain your credentials? I have a PhD in forensic psychology from Stanford University. I've worked with law enforcement for 20 years, specializing in criminal behavior patterns and psychological profiling. I've testified in over 300 cases as an expert witness. And have you reviewed the materials in this case? Yes. I've reviewed the police reports, witness statements, financial records, and video testimony. Based on your expertise, what's your professional opinion about the defendant's behavior? Gerald stood. Objection. The doctor never examined my client. Overruled. Dr. Ramos is speaking to behavior patterns, not making a clinical diagnosis. Continue, Dr. Ramos. The psychologist turned slightly toward the jury, a practiced movement. Based on the patterns I observed, Ms. Cartwright exhibits classic signs of someone experiencing financial desperation coupled with opportunity. The psychological profile is consistent with opportunistic theft. Simone felt like she'd been slapped. This woman had never met her, never spoken to her, never looked into her eyes, and yet she was telling a courtroom full of people that Simone fit the profile of a thief. Can you elaborate? Cole prompted. Certainly. Ms. Cartwright was facing severe financial stress. Medical debt, evictions, collection agencies. Research shows that when people experience this level of economic pressure, their moral boundaries become more flexible. Add to that the opportunity, being alone in a room with a valuable item, and the rationalization that the victim could afford the loss, and you have a perfect storm for theft. But the defense presented character witnesses who testified to Ms. Cartwright's honesty, Cole said, as if he didn't believe it. Character witnesses typically speak to past behavior under different circumstances. Economic desperation changes people. I've seen it countless times. Good people, honest people, who make poor choices when backed into a corner. The human survival instinct is powerful. Gerald's cross-examination was aggressive. Dr. Ramos, you never actually met Ms. Cartwright, correct? That's correct. Never interviewed her, never conducted any psychological testing, never had a conversation with her at all? No, but that's not unusual in forensic testimony. So your entire opinion is based on reading papers and looking at numbers? And patterns. Behavior patterns that are well established in psychological literature. Tell me, doctor, what percentage of people facing financial hardship commit theft? Dr. Ramos hesitated. That's difficult to quantify. Is it the majority? Are most poor people thieves? Of course not. So being poor and desperate doesn't actually predict criminal behavior, does it? It increases risk factors. But it doesn't determine behavior. My client is poor. That doesn't make her a thief. Gerald's voice was rising. You're asking this jury to convict her based on a profile, based on statistics, based on the fact that she's struggling financially. That's prejudice dressed up in academic language. Cole objected. Argumentative, sustained. Mr. Wu, ask questions. Gerald took a breath. Doctor, is it possible for someone in Ms. Cartwright's financial situation to maintain their moral integrity and not steal? Of course it's possible. So your profile doesn't actually prove anything about Ms. Cartwright specifically, does it? It establishes a pattern consistent with the alleged crime, or it establishes that she's poor, which we already knew. No further questions. As Dr. Ramos left the stand, Simone felt the weight of her testimony settle over the courtroom like fog. It didn't matter that the doctor had never met her. The jury had heard an expert say she fit the profile of a thief. That would stick in their minds. Judge Morrison called for a 15-minute recess before closing arguments. As people filed out to stretch their legs, get coffee, check their phones, Simone remained seated. She couldn't move. Her body felt like it had turned to stone. Gerald touched her shoulder gently. Do you want some water? Some air? She shook her head. She just wanted this to be over. Wanted to wake up and discover this was all some terrible nightmare. But the hard wood of the bench beneath her, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of old paper and anxiety, it was all too real. Her mind drifted against her will to the first time she'd met Lily. The interview with Adrian had been brief and cold. He'd barely looked at her resume, had asked only a few perfunctory questions about her experience with children and housekeeping. She'd gotten the sense he didn't really care who was hired as long as someone competent showed up. The decision, she later learned, had been made by Vanessa, his assistant, who'd chosen Simone mainly because she was the cheapest option. But when Lily had wheeled into the room in her chair, everything had changed. The little girl had looked at Simone with those piercing blue eyes, studying her in a way that felt like she was looking straight into her soul. Are you going to be nice to me because you feel sorry for me? Lily had asked bluntly. Because I hate that. Simone had crouched down to be at eye level, a movement that had surprised both Lily and Adrian. I'm going to be nice to you because that's who I am. Whether you're in a wheelchair or not doesn't change that. But I won't treat you like you're made of glass. Deal? Lily had smiled, really smiled, for the first time in that interview. Deal. Over the following months, they'd developed a rhythm. Simone would arrive each morning, help Lily with her stretches and exercises, making a game of the painful therapy. They'd read together, Simone doing ridiculous voices that made Lily laugh so hard she'd clutch her stomach. They'd work on schoolwork, Simone patient when Lily struggled with math, encouraging when she excelled at writing. And they'd talk. About everything. About Lily's mother, whose memory was starting to fade in ways that terrified the girl. About the accident, which Lily remembered in fragments. About her father, who Lily loved desperately, but who seemed unreachable behind walls of grief and work. Sometimes Daddy looks at me, and I can see he's thinking about Mommy, Lily had confessed one rainy afternoon. Like I remind him of what he lost. Simone's heart had broken. Oh, honey, you're not what he lost. You're what he still has. He just needs time to remember that. Do you think he'll ever be happy again? Lily's voice had been so small, so vulnerable. I think, Simone had said carefully, that he's getting there. I think you're helping him more than you know. There had been one morning, about 6 months into her employment, when everything had shifted. Simone had arrived to find the house in chaos. Adrian was supposed to be on a business trip but had returned early. Lily had developed a fever during the night, and the overnight nurse had called him in a panic. Simone had found him in Lily's room, still in his suit from the plane, sitting on the edge of her bed looking completely lost. Lily was crying, feverish and frightened, and Adrian clearly had no idea what to do. He was a man who commanded boardrooms, who made million-dollar decisions without hesitation, but faced with his sick child, he was paralyzed. Simone had stepped in quietly. Mr. Blackwood, why don't you change clothes? I'll sit with her. He'd looked at her with something like relief, then guilt. I should be able to do this. I'm her father. You are her father, Simone had said gently. But everyone needs help sometimes. That's not weakness. That's being human. He'd left, and Simone had gathered Lily into her arms, singing softly, a lullaby her own mother had sung to her. Lily's fever had broken by morning, and when Adrian had returned to check on her, he'd found them both asleep. Lily curled against Simone's side. Thank you, he'd said quietly, and for the first time, Simone had seen past the cold exterior to the grieving man underneath. That moment felt like it had happened in another lifetime now. How had they gotten from there to here? From that tentative trust to this courtroom, with Adrian testifying against her with his eyes cold and accusing. The recess ended, and people filed back in. Simone straightened in her chair, trying to prepare herself for closing arguments. This was it. After this, her fate would be in the hands of 12 strangers. The morning moved into closing arguments. Preston Cole stood and buttoned his suit jacket, turning to face the jury with the kind of presence that commanded attention. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about trust betrayed and opportunity seized. The facts are simple and clear. He walked along the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. Simone Cartwright was employed in Adrian Blackwood's home. She had complete access to every room, including the master bedroom where the stolen bracelet was kept. On September 15th, she entered that room at 9:43 in the morning. Security footage confirms this. She was alone in that room for 44 minutes. When she left, a $50,000 diamond bracelet was gone. Gone. A precious family heirloom, the last tangible memory Adrian Blackwood had of his beloved late wife. Stolen. Cole's voice dropped, becoming more intimate. Now, the defense wants you to believe this is all coincidence, that Ms. Cartwright just happened to be in the room when the bracelet disappeared, that her dire financial situation, her crushing debt, her desperate need for money has nothing to do with this theft. They want you to ignore the obvious and believe instead that somehow, magically, the bracelet vanished on its own or was taken by some phantom thief who left no trace. He shook his head slowly. Ladies and gentlemen, we must deal in facts, not fantasies. The fact is that Miss Cartwright needed money desperately. She owed over $200,000 in medical bills. She had $17 in her bank account. $17. She'd been evicted twice. Creditors were suing her. She was drowning financially. And then she found herself alone in a room with a $50,000 bracelet. Cole picked up an evidence bag containing a photo of the bracelet. This beautiful piece of jewelry represented a lifeline to her. It represented paying off her debts, saving her mother, starting over. And so she took it. She made a choice. A wrong choice. A criminal choice. But an understandable human choice. Simone wanted to scream that she'd never touched that bracelet, never even thought about taking it. But she sat frozen, watching Cole poison the jury against her with his reasonable voice and his logical arguments. Now, you've heard the defense try to create doubt. They've suggested that other people had access to the house. But ladies and gentlemen, those people had been trusted employees for years. They had no financial motive. They weren't in the room that day. Ms. Cartwright was. Cole turned and pointed at Simone, and she felt the weight of every eye in the courtroom. This woman had the means, the motive, and the opportunity. She was there. She needed money. The bracelet disappeared. That's not coincidence. That's guilt. He returned to the jury box. I know the defense will ask you to sympathize with Miss Cartwright's situation. And yes, her financial struggles are real. But being poor doesn't give anyone the right to steal. It doesn't excuse betraying the trust of a family that employed her, that let her into their home, that let her care for their disabled daughter. Adrian Blackwood lost his wife in a tragic accident. His daughter lost the ability to walk. And now, they've lost a precious memory. Because Ms. Cartwright decided her needs were more important than their trust. Cole's voice hardened. Don't let sympathy for her situation blind you to the facts. Don't let emotion override evidence. Ms. Cartwright is guilty of theft, and justice demands that you find her so. Thank you. He sat down, and Simone felt the room spinning. He'd made it sound so reasonable, so obvious. She could see it in some of the jurors' faces. They believed him. Gerald stood for his closing, and she could see his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his notes. He didn't have Cole's polish, didn't have his confidence, but he had passion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice stronger than she expected. "The prosecution wants you to convict Simone Cartwright of theft based on one thing and one thing only. She's poor. That's it. That's their entire case. She's poor, so she must be a thief. She needed money, so she must have stolen." Gerald moved closer to the jury. "But that's not evidence. That's prejudice. And we don't convict people in this country based on prejudice. We convict based on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And the prosecution has failed to provide that proof." He ticked off points on his fingers. "They have no video of Miss Cartwright taking the bracelet. No video. The security cameras show her entering and leaving the room, but they don't show what happened inside. They have no witnesses who saw her take it. No witnesses. They have no physical evidence connecting her to the crime. No fingerprints on the jewelry box beyond what you'd expect from someone who cleans in that room regularly. They never found the bracelet in her possession. Never. They can't prove she sold it, can't prove she pawned it, can't prove she has it." Gerald's voice rose. "So what do they have?" "They have the fact that she was in the room. Well, she was supposed to be in the room. It was her job to be in the room. They have the fact that she's poor. Well, being poor isn't a crime. If it were, half the country would be in prison. They have a psychologist who never even met my client, but claims she fits a profile that could fit millions of Americans facing financial hardship. That's not proof. That's guesswork, dressed up in fancy language." He turned to face Cole and Adrian. "The prosecution keeps talking about trust betrayed. But whose trust? Mr. Blackwood barely knew my client. He admitted on this stand that he was rarely home, that he didn't really interact with her. The person who trusted her, the person who knew her best, was his daughter. Lily Blackwood, a 10-year-old girl who adored Miss Cartwright, who'd been happier in those 8 months than she'd been since her mother's death." Gerald's voice softened. "And you heard Miss Cartwright testify. You heard the pain in her voice when she talked about being accused. You heard her describe her love for that little girl. Do you really believe a woman who cared so deeply about Lily would steal from her family? Would betray that child's trust?" He shook his head. "The prosecution wants a simple story. Rich man wronged by poor maid. But life isn't that simple. And justice can't be based on assumptions and stereotypes. My client deserves better. She deserves to be judged on actual evidence, not on the size of her bank account." Gerald looked each juror in the eye. "Simone Cartwright is not guilty. She's been the victim of circumstance, of assumptions, of a rush to judgment. And I'm asking you, I'm begging you, don't compound that injustice. Don't convict an innocent woman because it makes for a neat story. Demand proof. Demand real evidence. And when you look at the actual facts of this case, you'll see that proof doesn't exist. Thank you." He sat down, and Simone reached over to squeeze his hand. He'd done his best. She knew that. But would it be enough? Judge Morrison gave the jury their instructions, explaining the law, the burden of proof, the meaning of reasonable doubt. Her voice was steady, professional, detached. This was just another case to her. To Simone, it was her entire life. "The jury will now retire to deliberate," the judge announced. "We'll reconvene when they've reached a verdict. Court is in recess." The gavel fell, and Simone felt like it had struck her chest. Gerald gathered his papers, whispering encouragement she couldn't really hear over the roaring in her ears. Adrian and his team left through the front doors, surrounded by people offering support. Simone left through the side door, alone except for Gerald, feeling like she was walking through a dream. In the courthouse hallway, she found a bench and sat, staring at nothing. Gerald went to get coffee. Time became strange. She could hear the clock on the wall ticking but couldn't process the passage of minutes. Her mind kept replaying moments from the trial. Cole pointing at her. The psychologist saying she fit the profile. Adrian's cold testimony. The jury's faces, trying to read them. Trying to understand what they were thinking. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother's nurse. Your mother is asking for you. She's having a difficult day." Simone felt tears finally break through. Her mother, dying of cancer, who didn't even know her daughter was on trial because Simone couldn't bear to tell her. Her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs to raise Simone alone after her father left, who'd taught her that integrity mattered more than money, who'd be heartbroken to know she was accused of theft. "I'm sorry, Mama," Simone whispered to her phone. "I'm so sorry." Hours crawled by. The sun moved across the sky, visible through the tall courthouse windows, painting the marble floors in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Gerald returned with coffee that grew cold in her hands. She couldn't drink it, couldn't eat, could barely breathe. Other trials let out, people streaming past talking about their cases, their lawyers, their lives. She heard fragments of conversation. Someone had won custody of their children. Someone else had settled a lawsuit. Normal legal matters for normal people living normal lives. Simone sat frozen, trapped in limbo between innocent and guilty, between freedom and prison, between the woman she'd always been and the criminal the world wanted her to be. She found herself thinking about her mother, about the last time she'd visited before the trial, when she'd had to pretend everything was fine, that she was just busy with work. Her mother had been so weak, the cancer eating her from the inside, but she'd still managed to smile. "You work too hard, baby girl," she'd said, her voice paper thin. "You need to take care of yourself, too." Simone had held her mother's hand, feeling how delicate the bones had become, and promised she would. It was a lie. How could she take care of herself when her mother needed expensive treatments they couldn't afford? When every day was a battle to keep the lights on, to put food on the table, to maintain some shred of dignity while drowning in debt. But she'd never stolen. Never. And now, because she was poor, because she'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, because Adrian Blackwood needed someone to blame, she was here, waiting to hear if 12 strangers believed her, or the story they wanted to tell about people like her. At 4:30, just as she was starting to think they'd be here all night, the bailiff emerged from the courtroom. "They have a verdict." Simone's heart stopped. That was fast. Too fast. Gerald had told her quick verdicts usually meant guilty. Juries that acquit spend more time discussing, making sure they're right. Juries that convict come to consensus quickly because the evidence seems obvious. They filed back into the courtroom. Adrian and his team reappeared, looking confident. The jury returned to the jury box, their faces unreadable. Simone tried to remember what Gerald had said about reading juries. Don't make eye contact with the defendant if it's guilty, but she couldn't tell. She couldn't read them. Judge Morrison took her seat. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood, a middle-aged white man in a gray cardigan who'd frowned through most of the trial. "We have, Your Honor." Simone's hands clenched in her lap so hard her nails cut into her palms. This was it. This was the moment that would define the rest of her life. "What say you?" The foreman opened a slip of paper, and Simone saw his lips begin to form words. "In the case of the state versus Simone Cartwright on the charge of grand theft, we find the defendant." The courtroom doors burst open with a crash that echoed like thunder. Every head whipped around. Adrian shot to his feet, his face going completely white. Gerald gasped. Judge Morrison's gavel froze midair, because there, in the doorway, stood a miracle. Lily Blackwood, 10 years old, with her mother's red hair and her father's blue eyes and a determination that blazed from every inch of her small frame. And she wasn't in a wheelchair. She was standing on her own 2 legs, trembling but upright, supported by walking braces that went from her feet to her hips, her small hands gripping crutches that looked too big for her. The physical impossibility of it struck everyone at once. This child hadn't stood in 3 years. This child was paralyzed. The doctors had said permanent. The accident had severed nerves, damaged her spine. She would never walk again. But she was walking. Barely, shakily, every step clearly agony, but walking. Her face was streaked with tears, her chest heaving with effort, her entire body trembling from the exertion, and her voice, when it came, rang out clear and desperate in the stunned silence. "Stop. Please, you have to stop." Adrian moved toward her, his hands outstretched, his face a mask of shock and concern and confusion. "Lily, what are you doing? How did you—" "Daddy, please," Lily interrupted, and her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But you can't do this." Miss Simone didn't steal anything. She took another halting step forward, her crutches scraping against the courtroom floor. Every eye in the room was locked on her, mouths hung open. No one breathed. Judge Morrison recovered first, though her voice was strained. "Young lady, this is highly irregular. You cannot simply—" "I know who took the bracelet," Lily said, tears streaming down her face, her voice shaking but determined. "I know because I was there. I saw everything." Adrian's face went from white to gray. "Number." "Lily, you can't—" "I have to, Daddy." Her eyes found Simone's across the room, and Simone saw love there, and guilt, and desperate need for forgiveness. Miss Simone didn't steal Mommy's bracelet. "I know because—" Lily took one more step, and her left leg buckled. She would have fallen if Adrian hadn't lunged forward and caught her. He swept her up into his arms, and she buried her face in his shoulders, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry. But I couldn't let her go to prison. I couldn't. Not when she didn't do anything wrong." Adrian held his daughter, his face twisted with emotions Simone couldn't name. Judge Morrison stood, clearly at a loss. The foreman still held the unread verdict slip. The entire courtroom was frozen in tableau, and Simone sat at the defendant's table, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs, watching as everything she thought she knew shattered into pieces around her. End of Part 1. Part 2 begins. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the shocked silence like a blade. "Bailiff, clear a path. Get that child a chair. Now." Two bailiffs scrambled to action, dragging a chair from the side of the courtroom. Adrian carried Lily toward it, but she pushed against his chest, her small hands surprisingly strong. "No, Daddy. Put me down. I need to stand for this. I need them to see." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "Lily, you're exhausted. You need to rest. We can talk about this later." "There won't be a later," she said, her voice breaking. "Miss Simone's verdict is about to be read. If I don't speak now, she goes to prison. And I'll never forgive myself. Please, Daddy. Please let me do this." Something in her voice, in her eyes, made him slowly lower her back to her feet. He kept his hands on her shoulders, steadying her, and Simone could see he was trembling almost as much as his daughter. Judge Morrison leaned forward, her expression caught between judicial authority and human curiosity. "Young lady, I don't know who you are or how you got in here, but this court is in the middle of rendering a verdict. I'm Lily Blackwood, Your Honor. That's my father, Adrian Blackwood. And that woman," Lily pointed at Simone with a crutch, tears still streaming down her face, "is innocent. The bracelet that was stolen, my mother's bracelet, Miss Simone didn't take it. I know who did because I was there. I saw it happen." Preston Cole shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is absurd. A child bursting into court, interrupting proceedings. This is clearly a desperate ploy by the defense." Gerald was already moving. "Your Honor, I had no knowledge of this witness, but if she has information relevant to the case, the court should hear it." Judge Morrison looked from Lily to Adrian to Simone, her eyes sharp and assessing. Her gaze lingered on Lily's leg braces, on the way the child was shaking from the effort of standing, on the tears that wouldn't stop falling. Finally, she made a decision. "The verdict will be postponed." She looked at the foreman. "Jury, you'll remain in the jury room. Do not discuss this development." She turned back to Lily. "Miss Blackwood, I'm going to allow you to speak, but understand that if this is some kind of stunt, there will be consequences. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you need to tell the truth. Do you know what that means?" Lily nodded solemnly. "It means I can't lie, even if the truth hurts, even if it's scary. My mom used to say the truth is like medicine. Sometimes it tastes bad, but it makes you better." Judge Morrison's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Very well. Bailiff, swear her in." Adrian looked like he wanted to protest, but Lily squeezed his hand. "It's okay, Daddy. I know what I'm doing." The bailiff brought over a Bible, and Lily placed her small hand on it. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do," Lily said clearly. Judge Morrison gestured to the witness stand. "Can you make it up there?" Lily looked at the 3 steps leading up to the witness box, and for a moment, doubt crossed her face. Then she straightened her shoulders. "Yes, Your Honor. I can do it." What followed was the most painful, courageous thing Simone had ever witnessed. Lily, with Adrian hovering anxiously beside her, climbed those 3 steps. Each one took an eternity. Her legs shook, sweat beaded on her forehead. Once her knee buckled, and Adrian caught her, but she insisted on continuing. When she finally settled into the witness chair, her face was pale with exhaustion, but her eyes blazed with determination. Gerald approached gently. "Lily, can you tell us how old you are?" "I'm 10. I'll be 11 in February. And you're Adrian Blackwood's daughter?" "Yes." "And Simone Cartwright was your housekeeper?" "She was more than that." Lily's voice was fierce. "She was my friend, my best friend. She helped me with my exercises, read to me, made me laugh. When I was sad about my mom, she didn't try to make me stop being sad. She just sat with me and let me cry. She never treated me like I was broken." Simone felt tears spilling down her cheeks. Across the courtroom, she could see some of the jurors, still visible through the open jury room door, wiping their eyes. "Lily," Gerald said gently, "can you tell us about September 15th, the day the bracelet went missing?" Lily took a shaky breath. "That morning started normal. Miss Simone came at 7:30 like always. She made me breakfast, scrambled eggs with cheese the way I like, and we talked about the book we were reading. Then she helped me with my stretches. They hurt a lot that day, and I got frustrated. I yelled at her that I hated my legs, that I hated everything. And you know what she did? What did she do? She sat down on the floor next to my chair and said, 'Hate away. Your feelings are yours, and they're all okay.' So I cried, and she just stayed there with me until I was done." Gerald nodded. "What happened after that?" "She said she needed to clean my dad's room before he got home from his business trip. He was supposed to be back that afternoon. I asked if I could come with her because I didn't want to be alone. I was having a bad day. So she pushed my wheelchair to his room. Preston Cole stood. "Objection, Your Honor. The security footage shows only Miss Cartwright entering the bedroom." Lily's voice was small but steady. "That's because Miss Simone always pushed my chair in backwards. She said it was easier to maneuver in tight spaces. The camera only saw her because I was in front of her, and my chair is low." Judge Morrison looked at Cole. "Overruled. Continue, Miss Blackwood." "We went into Daddy's room," Lily said, her voice growing stronger. "Miss Simone was cleaning, and I was reading on my tablet. Then the doorbell rang downstairs. Miss Simone asked if I'd be okay for a few minutes while she answered it. I said yes. She left, and I was alone in the room." The courtroom was silent except for Lily's voice. Everyone was leaning forward, hanging on her words. "That's when I saw it," Lily continued. "The jewelry box was on Mommy's vanity. It was open a little bit. I wheeled over to look at it. I hadn't looked at Mommy's jewelry in a long time because it made Daddy too sad. But that day, I wanted to see it. I wanted to remember her." She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Adrian moved to give her a tissue, but she waved him away, determined to finish. I opened the box all the way. And there was the bracelet. The one Daddy gave Mommy on their anniversary. I'd seen pictures of her wearing it. She looked so happy in those pictures. I took it out and put it on my wrist, even though it was way too big for me. And I pretended I was her. I pretended I was beautiful and grown up, and that I could walk. Lily's voice broke, and she had to pause to collect herself. I was crying and talking to the bracelet like it was Mommy, telling her I missed her. And then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I panicked. I wasn't supposed to touch Daddy's things. I wasn't supposed to go into the jewelry box. So she sobbed. I hid the bracelet in my sweater pocket. I was going to put it back later, I swear. I was just scared. Who came up the stairs, Lily? It was Vanessa, Daddy's assistant. She came in looking for some papers. She looked at me and at the jewelry box, and I could tell she knew I'd been looking at it. She gave me this smile that wasn't really a smile and said, "Our little secret, okay?" Then she left. Gerald's voice was gentle. What happened to the bracelet? Lily was crying freely now. I kept it in my pocket, too scared to put it back. Later that day, when Daddy came home and discovered it was missing, I heard him calling for Miss Simone. I heard him accusing her, and I froze. I didn't know what to do. I was scared Daddy would be so disappointed in me, that he'd hate me for touching Mommy's things. "So you let Miss Simone take the blame?" "I didn't mean to," Lily sobbed. "I kept thinking I'd tell the truth. Tomorrow, I'd say. Tomorrow I'll be brave." But then the police came, and Miss Simone was arrested, and everyone was saying she stole it. And I couldn't find the courage. I was a coward. Adrian made a sound like he'd been punched. Oh, Lily. Lily looked at her father through her tears. "I know, Daddy. I know it was wrong. Every day Miss Simone was gone, every day I knew she was suffering, I felt worse and worse. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. All I could think about was how I'd destroyed her life because I was too scared to tell the truth." Gerald asked quietly, "Where's the bracelet now, Lily?" Lily reached into her sweater pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out a small cloth bag. She opened it, and there, gleaming under the courtroom lights, was a platinum and diamond bracelet. "It's here. I've kept it with me every day since it happened. Every day, feeling it against my chest, remembering what I'd done." The courtroom erupted. Voices overlapped in shock and disbelief. Judge Morrison's gavel rang out. "Order. Order in this court." Gerald took the bracelet bag, tagged it as evidence, and returned to Lily. "One more question. Your doctor said you would never walk again. How is it that you're standing here today?" Lily wiped her face. "When Miss Simone was arrested, I got really sick. Not sick like fever sick. Sick like I didn't want to live anymore. I stopped doing my therapy. I stopped eating. Daddy took me to doctors, but they couldn't find anything wrong. But I knew what was wrong. I was dying from guilt." Her voice grew stronger. "Then one night, I had a dream about Mommy. She was sitting on my bed, and she said, 'Baby girl, you have to make this right. You have to stand up for what's true.' And I said, 'Mommy, I can't stand up. I can't walk.' And she smiled and said, 'You can do anything if the reason is big enough.'" Lily looked directly at Simone. "When I woke up, I knew what I had to do. I started doing my therapy exercises in secret at night. It hurt so much I'd cry into my pillow so no one would hear. But I kept going. I had to get strong enough to come here, to stand up in front of everyone, and tell the truth. Because Miss Simone taught me that doing the right thing matters more than being comfortable, more than being safe. She taught me that by how she lived her life, even when it was hard." Gerald's eyes were wet. "No further questions, Your Honor." Preston Cole approached for cross-examination, but his usual confidence was shaken. "Miss Blackwood, you expect us to believe you've hidden this bracelet for months? That you let an innocent woman be tried for theft?" "Yes," Lily said simply, "because that's what happened. And I'll have to live with that shame for the rest of my life." Cole pressed on. "And conveniently, you come forward now, right as the verdict is about to be read?" "It's not convenient," Lily shot back with surprising force. "Do you think this is convenient for me? Do you think I wanted to stand up in front of all these people and admit I'm a coward? I came now because it was the only time I was strong enough to walk. I've been training for 3 months, Mr. Cole. 3 months of pain and work and crying, all so I could be here today, all so I could save Miss Simone." Cole seemed to deflate. No further questions. Judge Morrison looked at Adrian. "Mr. Blackwood, do you wish to examine your daughter?" Adrian's voice was rough with emotion. "No, Your Honor. He stopped, struggling. I believe her. Judge Morrison picked up the bracelet, examining it under the light. She looked at the police report, at the photos, comparing. Finally, she set it down and addressed the court. Based on this new evidence, the court has no choice but to declare a mistrial. She turned to Simone. Ms. Cartwright, you are free to go. All charges are dismissed. The courtroom exploded again. Reporters rushed for the doors. Spectators talked over each other. But Simone couldn't move. She sat there stunned as Gerald grabbed her shoulders. Did you hear that? You're free. It's over. You're free. Simone looked across the courtroom to where Lily sat in the witness chair, exhausted and crying, and Adrian stood beside her looking broken. Their eyes met, and Simone saw in Lily's face such desperate hope for forgiveness that her heart cracked open. She stood on shaking legs and walked toward them. The crowd parted. Judge Morrison watched but didn't stop her. When she reached the witness stand, she looked up at Lily. The little girl's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry, Miss Simone. I'm so sorry. Simone climbed the steps, her own legs weak, and pulled Lily into her arms. The child collapsed against her, sobbing, and Simone held her tight. I forgive you, sweetheart. I forgive you. But I let you suffer. I let them arrest you and put you on trial. How can you forgive me? Simone pulled back to look into Lily's eyes. Because you're 10 years old, and you were scared. Because you found the courage to do the hardest thing in the world. Because you literally taught yourself to walk again just to save me. How could I not forgive you? Lily threw her arms around Simone's neck, holding on like she was drowning, and Simone was the only solid thing in the world. Over the child's head, Simone's eyes met Adrian's. His face was a mess of emotions. Shame, relief, gratitude, confusion. He opened his mouth several times, but no words came out. Finally, he managed, I don't know what to say. Simone's voice was soft. You don't have to say anything right now. But I do. His voice cracked. I accused you. I had you arrested. I testified against you. I looked you in the eye and called you a thief. And all along you were innocent. All along I was caring for your daughter. That's all I ever did. Adrian's tears finally fell. I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know. Simone shifted Lily in her arms. The truth is, Mr. Blackwood, I was angry at you. Furious. But watching you with Lily just now, seeing your face when she told the truth, I don't think you're a bad man. I think you're a grieving man who made a terrible mistake. That's generous. More generous than I deserve. Maybe. She looked down at Lily, who had finally stopped crying and was listening. But someone recently taught me about courage and doing the right thing even when it's hard. Someone showed me that it's never too late to stand up for the truth. I think I can take that lesson to heart. Judge Morrison cleared her throat. As touching as this is, I need to clear my courtroom. Ms. Cartwright, you're free to go. Mr. Blackwood, take your daughter home. She needs rest. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell, and it felt like the end of a nightmare. The days that followed were strange and surreal. Simone's name was cleared publicly. The local news ran stories about the brave girl who learned to walk to save her friend. Adrian issued a public apology, both through the media and in person, arriving at Simone's small apartment with Lily in tow. They stood in her doorway, both looking nervous. May we come in? Adrian asked. Simone's apartment was tiny, nothing like the Blackwood estate. One room that served as bedroom and living room, a bathroom the size of a closet, a kitchenette with a hot plate and a mini fridge. She felt embarrassed having them see how she lived, but she stepped aside. Adrian looked around and she could see him taking it in. The second-hand furniture, the cracks in the walls, the single window that overlooked a parking lot. This is where you lived while you worked for us? Yes. And you came to our house every day and cleaned and cared for Lily, then came back to this. It was a job. I was grateful for it. Adrian's face twisted. Grateful? After how I treated you. After I took away your job, your reputation, your freedom. Mr. Blackwood, Adrian, please. After everything, I think you can call me Adrian. Simone hesitated. Adrian, then. I'm not going to lie and say it was okay. It wasn't. You hurt me badly. But I also understand that you were in pain. Loss makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. Lily, who'd been quiet, spoke up. Daddy wants to hire you back, with a big raise, and he wants to pay you for all the time you missed. And he wants to give you money to help with your mom's medical bills. Simone looked sharply at Adrian. Is that true? He had the grace to look embarrassed. Lily wasn't supposed to blurt it out like that, but yes. It's the least I can do. I don't want your guilt money. It's not guilt money. Adrian's voice was firm. It's what you're owed. What you were always owed. I underpaid you from the start, and then I took even that away. Let me make it right. Simone studied him. And if I take the job back, will you trust me? Or will I always be the woman you thought was a thief? Adrian met her eyes. You'll be the woman who forgave my daughter when she didn't have to. Who forgave me when I didn't deserve it. Who taught Lily more about courage and integrity in 8 months than I've managed in 10 years. That's who you'll be. Something in his voice made Simone's heart skip. She looked at Lily, who was watching them with hope written all over her face. Okay, Simone said slowly. But I have conditions. 1. I want a proper contract with proper pay. 2. I want my mother to get the medical care she needs. 3. I want to be treated with respect, not as charity. Done, Adrian said immediately. All of it. Whatever you need. And one more thing. Simone looked at Lily. I want to help with your physical therapy. If you could learn to walk in 3 months in secret, imagine what you could do with proper help. Lily's face lit up like the sun. Really? You'd help me? Of course, sweetheart. We're a team, remember? Lily launched herself at Simone, who caught her with a laugh. Adrian watched them with an expression so tender, it made Simone's breath catch. The return to the Blackwood estate was strange at first. The other staff members looked at her with mixtures of respect and embarrassment. Vanessa, interestingly, was no longer employed. Apparently, Adrian had discovered some financial irregularities in her work and let her go. Simone suspected it was more about punishment for her role in the whole mess, but she didn't ask. What surprised Simone most was how much Adrian had changed. He was home more, working from his office there instead of at the company. He joined them for meals. He watched Lily's therapy sessions, cheering her on. And he talked to Simone, really talked, about everything from books to politics to their childhoods. One evening, 3 months after the trial, Simone was helping Lily with exercises in the therapy room when Adrian appeared in the doorway. How's she doing? She's incredible, Simone said, watching Lily take steps between parallel bars without her braces. She gets stronger every day. Like her coach, Adrian said softly. Simone felt her cheeks warm. I'm just doing my job. Is that all this is to you? A job? The question hung in the air. Lily, wise beyond her years, suddenly announced she was tired and needed to rest. As she wheeled past her father, she stage-whispered, Dad, don't mess this up. After Lily left, Adrian stepped into the room. Simone, I need to say something. I've been trying to find the right time, the right words, but there might not be a right time. You don't have to say anything. I do. He moved closer. When I accused you, when I testified against you, I was so sure. I'd built this wall around my heart after Catherine died. Around Lily, too, because I was terrified of losing anyone else. And letting you into our lives, seeing how Lily loved you, how happy you made her. It scared me. So when the bracelet went missing, part of me almost wanted to believe you'd stolen it. Simone's voice was quiet. Why? Because it would prove I was right to keep my distance. Right to not let anyone get close. If you were a thief, I could dismiss what I was starting to feel for you as foolishness. What you were starting to feel. Adrian took another step. I was falling in love with you, Simone. I fought it every day. Told myself it was inappropriate, that you were an employee, that I was being foolish. But every morning you'd arrive, and Lily would light up, and I'd hear your laugh from wherever I was working, and I'd find excuses to come out and join you both. And it terrified me. Simone's heart was pounding. You had a strange way of showing it, accusing me of theft. I know. His voice broke. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But if you give me a chance, if you let me prove that I've learned, that I've changed, I promise I will spend every day showing you that you matter, that you're valued, that you're loved. Adrian, I don't know what to say. Say you'll have dinner with me, just the two of us. Let me court you properly. Let me show you who I am when I'm not hiding behind walls. And if I say yes, if we try this and it doesn't work, it'll affect Lily. Then we'll handle it like adults. We'll put her first, always. But Simone, I have to try. I can't let you slip away without at least trying. Simone looked into his eyes, seeing vulnerability there, and hope. One dinner. His smile could have powered the sun. One dinner. Thank you. That dinner turned into 2, then 3, then regular dates that Lily absolutely delighted in planning. She became their biggest cheerleader, leaving not-so-subtle hints about weddings and forever. 6 months after the trial, on a Saturday afternoon, Adrian gathered both Lily and Simone in the garden behind the estate. Lily was walking more steadily now, using only a cane for support. Simone had helped her every step of the way, literally and figuratively. I have something to say to both of you, Adrian began. These past months have been the happiest of my life since Catherine died, and I know she would be happy too, seeing Lily thriving, seeing our family healing. He turned to Simone. You came into our lives as a housekeeper, but you became so much more. You saved my daughter, not just in court, but in every way that matters. You taught her courage, you gave her love. You showed her that she was more than her disability. And you saved me too, even when I didn't deserve saving. Adrian dropped to one knee and Simone gasped. Lily was bouncing up and down, grinning. Simone Cartwright, will you marry me? Will you officially become part of our family? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making up for my mistakes and proving that you are the most important thing in my world? Tears streamed down Simone's face. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. Lily cheered so loudly the neighbors probably heard. Adrian slid a ring onto Simone's finger, a beautiful but simple band because he'd learned she didn't care for ostentatious displays. Then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. I love you, he whispered. Both of you. My girls. We love you too, Daddy, Lily said, wrapping her arms around both of them. And this time, we're all brave enough to hold on. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the estate garden with close friends and family. Simone's mother was there, her cancer in remission thanks to the treatment Adrian had funded. She cried through the entire ceremony, telling anyone who'd listen that her daughter was the best person she knew. Lily was the flower girl, walking down the aisle without any assistance, dropping petals with great ceremony. When she reached the altar, she whispered loudly, I did it, Miss Simone. I walked for you. You did, sweetheart. You walked for both of us. The officiant spoke about love tested by fire, about forgiveness and redemption, about families built not just by blood, but by choice. And when Adrian kissed his bride, Lily cheered again, and everyone laughed. At the reception, Simone's mother pulled her aside. Baby girl, I'm so proud of you. Not because you're marrying a rich man, but because you never lost yourself. You stayed kind when the world was cruel. You forgave when you had every right to hate. You're a better woman than I ever was. Mama, you taught me everything I know about strength. Then I did something right. Her mother squeezed her hand. I was so scared when you were arrested. So scared I'd lose you. But I should have known better. You're a fighter. Always have been. I learned from the best. They held each other for a long moment, both crying happy tears. Gerald, Simone's attorney, approached with a glass of champagne and a wide smile. To the woman who never gave up, he said, I've been practicing law for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened in that courtroom. Lily walking in, telling the truth. It was like something out of a movie. It felt like a miracle, Simone agreed. It was courage, Gerald corrected. From both of you. You had the courage to stand up for yourself when everyone assumed the worst. Lily had the courage to admit the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. That's not a miracle. That's character. Adrian joined them, wrapping an arm around Simone's waist. Gerald, thank you for defending my wife so fiercely. I know I made your job harder. Gerald raised an eyebrow. That's an understatement, Mr. Blackwood. But I'm glad it worked out. He clinked his glass against theirs. To new beginnings. To new beginnings. They echoed. As the evening progressed, Lily insisted on making a speech. She stood on a chair, tapping her glass with a spoon until everyone quieted down. I'm not supposed to make speeches because I'm just a kid, she began, her voice clear and strong. But this is my family, and I want to say something. When my mom died, I thought our family died too. I thought Daddy and I would just be sad forever. And then Miss Simone came to our house. She looked directly at Simone. You didn't just clean and cook. You made us laugh again. You made me feel like even though I couldn't walk, I was still whole. And you made Daddy smile, even when he was trying not to. Lily's voice wavered slightly. I did something really bad. I hurt you so much. And I thought you'd hate me forever. But you forgave me. You taught me that mistakes don't have to define us, that we can always choose to do better. So today isn't just about a wedding. It's about our family coming back to life. It's about second chances. And I'm so grateful that Miss Simone gave us ours. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Simone was crying openly, and Adrian had to clear his throat several times before he could speak. That evening, as the party wound down, Simone and Adrian stood on the terrace watching Lily dance with her grandmother. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. Are you happy? Adrian asked, his arm around her waist. Happier than I ever thought possible. Even after everything? The trial? The accusations? Simone turned to face him. Especially after everything. Because we wouldn't be here without it. Lily wouldn't have found her courage. You wouldn't have opened your heart. I wouldn't have learned that I'm strong enough to survive anything. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. You're remarkable. Number. She smiled. I'm just someone who refuses to let circumstances define her. Someone who believes in second chances. Someone who knows that families aren't perfect, but they're worth fighting for. Adrian kissed her forehead. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me now. Thank God for that. Inside, Lily was telling everyone who'd listen about how her new mom was the bravest person in the world. About how she'd stood up in court and told the truth even when she was scared. About how love was stronger than fear. And watching her, seeing the joy on her face, Simone knew that every painful moment had been worth it. Every tear, every doubt, every terrifying second in that courtroom. Because it had led to this. To family. To love. To home. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Lily was asleep, Simone found the old navy blue dress she'd worn to court. She held it in her hands, remembering the woman who'd put it on that morning, scared and alone. She'd come so far since then. They all had. What are you going to do with that? Adrian asked from the doorway. Simone looked at the dress, then at her husband. I think I'll donate it. Someone else might need it for their fresh start. Perfect idea. She folded it carefully and set it aside. Then she turned to Adrian, to the life they were building together, to the future that had once seemed impossible. And she smiled, because she knew without a doubt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the end, the accusation that had nearly destroyed her had instead given her everything she'd never known she needed. A daughter who loved her fiercely, a partner who'd fought through his own demons to be worthy of her, and most importantly, proof that she was stronger than any circumstance, braver than any fear, and capable of love even after heartbreak. The courtroom had been her darkest hour. But standing in her new home, with her new family sleeping safely nearby, Simone understood that darkness sometimes has to come before dawn, and her dawn was more beautiful than she'd ever imagined possible. The next morning, Simone woke early and found Lily already up, standing by the window without her cane, looking out at the garden. "Good morning, sweetheart." Lily turned with a smile. "Good morning, Mom. Can I call you that now?" "Mom." Simone's heart swelled. "I would love nothing more." They stood together, mother and daughter, not by blood but by choice, watching the sun rise over their new beginning. And Simone knew, with certainty, that this was what healing looked like. This was what forgiveness looked like. This was what love looked like when given freely, without conditions, without fear. This was home.